Wonderful. Good afternoon, good afternoon, good afternoon, everybody. We're sitting at about 120 on our numbers. I'd like to welcome all the beautiful ladies, the amazing queens. We know we have some wonderful gents who are with us this afternoon as well. We welcome you too. We thank you for being our champions. And we say happy Friday, happy long weekend. May you be blessed and may you have a wonderful, wonderful long weekend. To those who do not know who I am, my name is Ndombi Mangwani. I'm a very proud member of the Accenture team. I'm also the lead for the Women's Forum in Accenture. And today I'll be doing the introductions for our inaugural Voices of Change coffee session. We're very proud of the work we deliver in the Voices of Change movement, where we introduce corporates to inclusion, diversity, and collaborating together for success. The coffee session we are having today is the first we are having in 2022. It is an initiative whereby the Voices of Change movement actually introduces you to leaders, men, women, and all these leaders are either discussing with us how they made it to the top, or how they are changing lives, or how they are making a difference towards inclusion and diversity. We believe that Voices of Change should not just be about the event in August, but rather we share knowledge, we develop each other, and we bring in leaders who can help us understand that failing fast is perfectly normal, but how we rise again. It's a great honor for me today to welcome our speaker, Mikateko Tshetshe from Unilever. As we all know, on the invite, we were told that Mikateko is the CFO of Unilever Africa, but Mikateko wants us to understand, before being a CFO, she is a daughter, sister, a proud mom to two inspirational kids. She's also a qualified SEMA fellow and holds a BCom degree with UNISA. She says she strives to be a cultural architect, leading for equality, diversity, and inclusion. And as an advocate for psychological safety, she is passionate about this topic. As a leader for sustainability, purpose-led growth, enabled by digital thriving teams, and also she pushes herself and her team to believe in lifelong learning. And she says, if you want to do anything, you can. You just need to put your mind in the right place and you can deliver it. Mikateko has spent most of her career in FMCG sector, and she also has some experience in the pharmaceutical space. She has over 20 years experience in finance and 10 years as an executive. She is currently leading the finance team in Unilever, contributing to the sustainable growth of brands that have purpose in Africa as well. And she is also very passionate about developing leaders at Unilever. She has worked for AstraZeneca, SC Johnson, and Bayer. Her purpose is to dream. In a nutshell, she believes that she can do anything that she puts her mind to, and she is not limited by her personal circumstances, but rather inspired by her crazy dreams. She was nominated to be CFO for the CFO Awards in 2021, a very exciting external recognition. However, what Mikateko treasures the most is the fact that people will say how she made them feel long after she is gone. Can I ask all the beautiful people on this call to give a round of applause to our inaugural coffee sessions, number one, and a very warm welcome to Mikateko, who has joined us. Mikateko, we have close to 180 people who are listening to you today, and we're very honored that you are the first speaker, the first guest for the inaugural Voices of Change coffee session, our leadership series, where we develop our men and women to lead and to be passionate about equality. Welcome, and over to you.
Thank you very much for that very, very warm welcome. And I feel super privileged to be here, just to have the opportunity to live my purpose, which is really to dream, to live and to share. And I think, as Dombi's already said, it's really around believing that I can be and do things beyond circumstances that I was born into, but making sure that I'm mentally and physically present, living in the moment to bring those dreams to life, and then also being able to share that with, first and foremost, my family and my friends, and certainly with communities that I'm a part of, which of course includes Unilever and other communities, including this very same community. So I know most of you are potentially coming from different calls and meetings, and it's been a bit of a rushed morning. And I think in the spirit of all of us being fully present, number one, I would love to invite all of you to please feel free to engage on the chat. I will be sharing a little bit of context setting, but please, if anything does resonate with you, please just type it on the chat and then I can always reflect on it later. But I would just like to give everybody literally 30 seconds just for all of us to take a very deep breath and be fully present in this moment, so that we are mentally here, we are physically here, and also just our hearts are in the space. So I'm going to count us down. We have about 30 seconds, and then I will go ahead and start with my process. Okay, so on the next slide, please, Colleen. I've shared a little bit about my purpose, and to me, just to amplify a little bit more on family. Family is really like music. There certainly are some very high notes and some very low notes, but always an absolutely stunning song. And I think for us as a community within South Africa, I hope that we see ourselves as a big, big family where we certainly have some high notes and some low notes. But at the end of the day, if you look at it over a very, very long period of time, there always is a beautiful song and something that we can really all resonate with and share about our stunning country. I love reading, and I think, as Ntombi shared, lifelong learning is a part of my being. And a book that I definitely feel is really relevant for today is a book called Boundaries. If you have not read it, I really would encourage you to either Google a summary online or even grab a copy for yourselves. Personally life-changing, but also very, very relevant in the work environment. On the next slide. So I'm going to do a little bit of context setting because I want to make sure that we're all on the same page with respect to the topic that I'm going to talk to you about today. Then I'll share a little bit about my own perspective of why it's actually important, and then share some lived experiences, and then open us up for a conversation. I'm hoping that we'll have at least, at minimum, about 15 minutes for a good, enriching conversation. So please, like I said, please, I really invite you to feel psychologically safe on this call, and you'll understand what that really means shortly, but really is to make sure that we are capturing what resonates with you. Give us a smile, give us a heart. It's always very difficult on this virtual platforms, but so that I know that you guys are still there, feel free to give me a high five, a heart, or anything that really sticks with you guys. Okay, on the next slide, Colleen. So imagine for a moment that you are lying in a medical room and you have the professional surgeons literally breathing over your life and your being. You are not present, and yet you are very much alive. You are there for a particular procedure, and yet the doctor has got it wrong. The person that's responsible for the surgery thinks you're there to remove a limb, and yet you're there for a very, very minor surgery. What would you be hoping for? Would you be hoping that one of the team members would speak up, or would you be hoping to wake up, unfortunately, looking very different from the way that you came in because of an error that was made, because nobody in the room saw it fit to speak out? So on the next slide. So Amy Edmondson is a name that is very, very familiar with the topic of psychological safety. But just for some historical context, psychological safety has really been studied by scholars all the way back to 1965. And according to them, it really is around making sure that we are reducing interpersonal risk, which is necessarily accompanied by uncertainty and change. When Amy Edmondson did some research within the hospital industry, she found that she really was trying to understand what makes a high-performing team. And instead, she found that high-performing teams in the hospital industry also actually reported a high error rate. This is obviously very concerning. High-performing team, when she did her survey, indicated that it was very important to cultivate an interpersonal climate in which everyone, from the lowest ranking employee in the team to the most senior individual, felt very empowered to speak up, and she called this a climate of psychological safety. On the next slide. So when you look at psychological safety, there is another author that's also done quite a lot of research on this topic called Timothy Clark. And in his book on the 4 stages of psychological safety, he refers to psychological safety for inclusion, which really resonates with, I'm sure all of us in our schooling life have been through something called the Maslow's hierarchy of needs, which really amplified, among other things, the need to belong. So psychological safety in the work environment, at home, in any environment at all, is very critical to help ensure that we all feel that we are included and we belong. It's also important for us to feel that we are in an environment which will enable us to learn, and an environment which recognizes that we can lean into conversations that may be comfortable to us or even uncomfortable to us, but enable us to be confident enough to understand that we are there for a growth journey. The third stage of psychological safety is contributor safety. So if you think about your current work environment, we are all in our environments today because we feel and we believe that we can all make a difference. And psychological safety is very important for us being able to make that difference, contributing towards that difference. We are also all here to make things better. From a Unilever perspective, you would understand that our purpose is to make sustainability a commonplace. And it's very important that our teams believe that they can walk through all of the 4 stages of psychological safety, feeling that they belong in the team, feeling that they can learn, feeling that they can contribute towards making a difference towards our consumers that we serve, and also making sure that they feel that they can challenge the status quo to help ensure that things can be made better. The next slide. It's important for us to also understand what psychological safety is not, right? Psychological safety is certainly not something that should enable us to feel that we can be shielded from our accountability. It's not there for having an environment that is nice. It's not intended for us to be politically correct. It's not intended for us to just talk about psychological safety, but not actually be able to model the behavior. And we'll talk through a couple of examples around modeling that behavior as well. On the next slide. So Google is another big organization that certainly was taken by storm with the topic of psychological safety. And this was through a project that was done. It's called Project Aristotle. And I'll go to the next slide where there's a brief video, which is intended to tell you what Google learned around building perfect teams, because they were obviously on a search to making sure that they could develop high-performing teams. I'm hoping that through this video, you'll get a little bit of more context in the work environment with respect to the importance of the role of psychological safety. Thank you, Colleen. So I'm sure from that very, very brief video, there's a big, big call out on the importance of making sure that we are having conversation turn taking. And what that really means is if I'm hosting a meeting and there's a couple of different members in that meeting room, it's my responsibility as the leader to make sure that I'm helping to ensure that different voices are being heard. That is very, very important. But the other critical thing that gets called out is also being socially sensitive to the members, to the diverse members that are actually sitting around the room, understanding who they are, understanding to some perspective or to some level of degree, looking at things like body language, looking at just their behaviors, looking at how they react to certain conversations, and looking at that from a social sensitivity perspective to see and feel the mood in the room. So our responsibility as individuals and responsibility as leaders is to help make sure that we are actually enabling to create a psychologically safe environment or climate or even a culture within our organizations to help elevate and unlock group performance. So I hope that video just helped to bring together what the whole concept of psychological safety is, because I think it really is a critical enabler to drive ideas within organization. It is an enabler to unlock innovative ideas, and also certainly very critical for inclusive growth within our different organizations. On the next slide, please. So why is this important? So in my personal experience, having been through a couple of multinational organizations, and you can go to the next slide, Colleen, I certainly find myself as one of either the first Black and female leaders in different boards, and typically needed to make sure that I could find my own voice. I needed to make sure that I was actually anchored in the knowledge of who I am obviously really something that has been predefined from my very, very early age, influenced largely by my parents, my mom and my dad, and obviously growing within a community of my sisters. Very, very strongly anchored within my values, which include things like faith, integrity, respect, and excellence. And I think all of us can even give examples of what our individual values are that help to anchor who we are as individuals. So we should always remember that walking into any room or walking into any table or even at home, know who you as the individual are, because then that helps you to understand who you are, what environment are you getting into, and please take the time to know who the other people in that particular room are, because that social capital that we actually build within this room is one of the very critical levers of starting to build what we call is trust. Sure. So from a South Africa perspective, if you were to imagine, sorry, somebody's line is not muting. So from a South Africa perspective, if you were just to imagine for a few minutes that South Africa was one big corporation called South Africa Inc., we would all certainly be quite clear on what purpose we are actually leading for. We would all be quite clear that we wanted to future foot ourselves as individuals, but we certainly also want to make sure that we are future fitting our ways of working and also making sure that we are future fitting our business, which would be South Africa Inc. And we would be wanting to do all of this to help ensure inclusive growth. And all of these principles are very much linked and tied up to the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals that are called out there. And I know that these goals are something that this particular community is also quite keen to unlock, really promoting well-being and healthy lives. And I think also in the context of the COVID environment, where mental health really has been quite a very big challenging issue, it is very important that we are very human in how we relate to each other, and not just coming into the work environments with the list of the deliverables that need to be done and taking no regard to respect to the individuals in the room, where they are from a personal perspective and how we can help. Because at the end of the day, all of us as individuals and as leaders can only be as great as the collaboration that we are actually able to unlock on a table. Like I said, there's another critical growth on inclusion, and the last one really being to help make sure that, again, very, very critical from a sustainable development goal as well, that we can actually achieve the gender equality that we want for our women and girls, and obviously in strong collaboration with the allies from the men in this team and the men within our community. On the next slide, please. So just to share a little bit more on lived experiences, and then we will move on to a Q&A in the last 15 minutes of this call. On the next slide. So one of the things that I am very, very passionate about, and I think Ntombi did call it out when she was doing a high-level introduction of myself, I do see myself as a person that contributes towards the culture of an organization and being able to shape that or shift it in certain cases where, in my view, the culture has needed to be shifted. And very, very important in terms of the corporate culture that we as South Africa Inc. or the different organizations that we work for, we really do need to understand that company culture is inextricable from the emotion and social dynamics of the people in the organization. And this really talks to the fact that we come together as a community and we are all human. And we need to understand that we all come with different emotions, and we also come with different social diverse backgrounds, and that really needs to be understood and very much appreciated. And I think being conscious towards that in all of our organizations is very, very important. However, I'm not too sure if any of you have ever had to change an organization. And I think if you've, in my experience, I worked for SC Johnson for about just under 10 years. And then I kind of moved to the pharmaceutical industry for 2 years. And then I've been now with Unilever since 2017. One of the things that I kind of saw when I was busy moving between the different organizations was how different organizations were actually in different parts of the journey when it came to a speak up culture. And why is the speak up culture important? Speak up culture is important because if we are sitting around a boardroom and making business decisions, and sometimes you might feel that you have like a burning feeling in your belly, something that other people call a gut feel or something like that, around a particular topic that you're talking about. That really tells you that there's something that's being discussed in the room that you should actually be leaning into and either contributing towards or challenging or helping to influence the direction that actually will be taken. But in some organizations that I actually have been a part of, I have found that that speak up culture was not present. And I think this is where my passion for psychological safety and really just sharing it beyond myself started to grow and started to be amplified. And I really started proactively inviting people to feel comfortable to actually participate in different forums where they would actually be found. And this, I think, really does enable businesses to have a much better chance and probability of being able to grow in a very, very sustainable way. So imagine that you're sitting around the table and that there's a decision that needs to be taken, and you have a totally different opinion around what should be done. But you say nothing. As soon as that meeting is over, you find a friend and you talk about how the decision was made was correct or incorrect, and yet you would have had a huge impact on the direction that the company would have been taken. So if you think in South Africa around some of the things that we've seen with state capture, and I'm not saying that, state capture is the only place where things go wrong because we don't have enough of a speak up culture. It certainly does happen in some of these smaller corporates as well. But I just want to amplify the effect and the impact of what happens when individuals that are sitting around relevant tables are not feeling comfortable enough to actually speak up, or are not feeling that they belong in that particular organization, or they feel that they're not being seen, and even worse, not being heard. So culture is something that all of us really need to appreciate and understand that it's something that we actively work on every single day. And one of the things that really will enable you and all of us to get to the culture that we need to get to is by making sure that we are all very, very much aware of psychological safety and model psychological safety, and also invite other people to come with us along on that journey. On the next slide, please. So how do we shift towards more psychologically safe climates or psychologically safe cultures and environments? These are just a couple of examples. I think if you look at all of the research that's been done by different researchers, there certainly are other examples, but these are the 4 that I've chosen to talk about. I think it's very important to be intentional to articulate the aspiration, right? And if you look at the aspirations that have been set out by Voices of Change, very, very clear around how the movement really wants to harness the power of diversity, collective effort to make sure that we can actually empower and drive inclusive growth for our leaders. And this not only needs leadership from the top, but it also needs all of us as current leaders and future leaders to really participate. So I think the vision has been clearly articulated. Now the question is, have we selected and developed the right leaders who will enable us to actually align with a desired culture that is required to obviously then achieve the aspiration? And what I mean by that is, just to give a non-related example, within Unilever, we obviously want to have a diverse and inclusive growth culture. And one of the things that we do when we are interviewing candidates for different roles, we actually have a question as part of the interview process, which talks to inclusive growth. The question would really be talking about things like, can you share with us an example where you have had to face a situation of unconscious bias? What have you done to contribute towards changing that within your environment? The question could also be talking about the concept of psychological safety in itself, just to see whether individuals understand the importance of allowing for and leading for a speak up culture, and also leading for a diverse and inclusive environment. We also need to make sure that within our organizations, the conversations that we are having are also underscoring the importance of the change. And Voices of Change is definitely a very, very clear example where this is not a one-time event, and I'm very, very happy to start seeing that these coffee sessions are being built into the program, because a once-a-year conversation does not change the trajectory. This is something that really needs to be alive in all of our organizations a lot more often, and not only in our organizations, but even in our personal lives. Because the person that you bring into the work environment is the same person that you live with at home. The last one will be just to reinforce the desire for change through organizational design. And you could include things like your training programs, really being quite intentional to do training on psychological safety, or to do training on diversity and inclusion, and make sure that there are structural things that are actually happening within your organization to help you to achieve those aspirational goals that we have for ourselves. So these are just a couple of examples of things that you could initiate within your spaces to help drive the awareness, education, and also live and model the psychological safety that is required. On the next slide, please. So I mentioned earlier that psychological safety really does help us meet some very fundamental and basic human needs. And I'll start with the point of family, because at the end of the day, this is where we all start, and then we kind of come into the work environment. While I was at SC Johnson, I did this amazing course, and it was called Crucial Conversations. And it was a course that was really trying to help people understand the importance of keeping communication lines open. And whether it's just in general keeping communication lines open, but more importantly, where you are needing to engage on something that might be emotionally sensitive or trigger some sort of reactions for different reasons. And that course really just amplified the importance of making sure that you are either open to conversation and you are dialoguing and engaging with the next person, or you are actually going to move into fight or flighting mode. And the important thing really being, how do you continually get yourself back into the open engagement? And within that open engagement, that really says to the person that you're talking to that I see you, I hear you, I might not agree with you, but I respect you. And that is very important. And if you can really just reflect on it for 2 seconds, I'm sure that's actually how we operate within our families. No matter how much we are fighting, loving each other, having lots of fun, we always try to come back to a point where we are still focused on the common purpose. And that common purpose within the family is that you have a sense of belonging. You have a place where you really belong, hopefully without any conditions, and you really want to bring a part of that human element into your work environment. And just think about it for a second. A third of your life, working life, is spent in the office. About 8 or more hours of any working day, you are with your colleagues. You're not with your family. So why is it that you want to bring somebody else to work and leave the real Mikateko at home? So personally, I prefer to be myself in every single situation, bring the real me into my home space and into the work environment, and make sure that I belong in both of those environments. And that is why I'm quite proactive with driving to cultivate and influence culture and the climate within the organization for it to be psychologically safe. It's because I want to feel that I belong where I am. On the next slide, please. Psychological safety is also very important to help us realize the benefits of operating in diverse teams. So at the moment, we've all been working in this new hybrid world, partly at work, partly online. It's been a big change. And if you really just think about the first few days of being virtual, I'm sure a lot of us were either not even sharing screens because we were still trying to either organize ourselves, we hadn't really discovered the background, so you were not really feeling comfortable. And as a result, some of us within the work environment, we lost that benefit of being human, right? We lost the benefit of having conversations with me actually seeing how are you reacting or responding to something. So the benefit of those diverse teams is really to make sure that you are also getting diverse views on the table to help contribute towards the inclusive growth agenda that we have for our corporation and largely called South Africa Inc. So diverse teams are very important. And I know that there's been lots and lots of conversations about race. In some organizations, those conversations have been fairly heated and they've been fairly uncomfortable. But I do just want to say this is our journey. And this is the journey that we all need to own. And it's a journey that I'm very comfortable and confident that with all of us leaning into the journey and feeling and finding a way to be psychologically safe will only enable us as South Africa Inc. to actually grow and be a much healthier organization and a country at the end of the day. So please allow those diversity and inclusion conversations to please take place, but find a way to make it psychologically safe for everybody to contribute. On the next slide, please. Of course, we are in the work environment and we are here to help enable high-performing teams. And you would possibly be familiar with the Patrick Lencioni model, which actually talks about the fact that to get to a point where you are a high-performing team focused on collective results, you need to start with one of the very basic building blocks, which is called trust. Because if you don't have that pillar of trust firmly anchored within your organization and within your teams, then it means that we have a fear of being vulnerable. It means that we have a fear of being fully present and immersed within the stuff, the content that we're actually trying to drive for, or the purpose that we're trying to drive for. So how are we as leaders, how are we as individuals taking the time out to build the trust? You can't just assume that because we're coming together as a community of people that therefore there is trust. Trust requires active building. And in the good old days, we'd have team buildings and, it would all be great and it has been fun. But how are we actually now doing that differently in this virtual world? And I really do encourage us to think about the social capital that we've all been withdrawing from in the last 2 years. I think now that we have the opportunity to either be in the office, let's consciously take the time to rebuild that social capital and make sure that we are actively building on a fundamental pillar of trust. because with that trust, then you know that your teams around the table are more confident to speak up, they're more confident to open up, they're confident to challenge ideas, to bring ideas on the table, and to contribute towards that bigger collective result and purpose at the end of the day. On the next slide, please. I want us to all dare to dream. You might be familiar with an author, and she's also a researcher called Brené Brown, but she says to be the person we all long to be, we must be vulnerable. We must take off the armor, we must put down the weapons, and we must show up and let ourselves be seen. And I'd amplify that and say, let ourselves be seen, let ourselves be heard, and certainly make sure that we are respecting each other as human beings. So please, can we all just dare to lead? On the next slide, please. So I tend to reach out into different parts of the world and industries just for ideas. And when I was busy doing my research on psychological safety, it was very interesting to see that in the creative industry, Pixar, which I'm sure most of you are all familiar with, for great and amazing award-winning movies like Toy Stories and The Incredibles, they actually have a forum called the Brain Trust. And the Brain Trust is basically a group of trusted individuals that come together periodically to review the process of the films that are actually being made within the Pixar organization, to help ensure that they are moving from mediocrity and really landing and anchoring themselves in that area of excellence. And it really talks to us being vulnerable enough to actually co-create on some of the innovative ideas that we're actually doing within the organization. And I'm not just talking young team members in agile squads, etc., etc. I'm talking about very experienced leaders within the organization leaning into those conversations and offering themselves as servant leaders to share ideas and to challenge the team to really grow and expand their thinking so that we can really be disruptive in some of the things that we actually need to deliver within the organizations. So psychological safety, again, through something very creative, but very simple as well, that you can call the Brain Trust within your organization, really enable you to create those spaces where people feel that they can come with their half-baked thinking and get the benefit of your experiences to help them really to amplify their ideas and move towards excellence. On the next slide, please. So, just some food for thought. Organizations that are going about without assessing their team's psychological safety are living with blind spots. And employees that are feeling the pain are not able to speak up about it when the workplace is not psychologically safe. So what are we as this community going to do to understand, number one, your own psychological safety, number two, your team's psychological safety, number three, just do an assessment of your own organization's psychological safety. And I can assure you, this is worth it. It really is worth it, because we cannot go on in organizations where we bring the other person that we live with at home, who is actually a fantastic person that we all love, but we leave them at home because you want to bring somebody that is not speaking up in the organization and not really being their full selves. So I really encourage you, teams can go on like this for years, and often it requires courageous leaders, either through anonymous surveys or through being able to really just open up and talk about this topic to make sure that we can actually change. On the next slide, please. So how do you want others to feel? I love this quote from Maya Angelou, who says, people will forget what you say. People will forget what you did, but people will never forget how you made them feel. On the next slide, please. So this is me. I'm psychologically safe. I am my best self every single day without fear of negative consequences of self-image, status, or career in pursuit of my common goals and my common purpose. And yes, not every single day is rosy, but the days that are not rosy, I still feel I can control and influence and still remain psychologically safe. On the last slide. So I'm inviting you to please join me and feel psychologically safe. Thank you.
Wow. And there's many hands coming through as well, Mikateko, on the group
Well, I would
chat.
encourage everyone to please be human, unmute your mic and let me hear it.
Absolutely amazing. Absolutely
Wow, that was great.
That's wonderful.
Thank you for being human and having me hear your clap. I appreciate it.
That was absolutely
Why are you
incredible. Please, sorry if we could mute, we're not speaking. I'm hearing a bit of an echo. Thank you so much. Mikateko, that was absolutely amazing. I think we're all feeling it. There's so many comments on the chat. And it's so great that you ended with Maya Angelou's quotes of that. She always remembers how people made them feel. And I feel like we've all been impacted. I will remember how you made me feel, and I think many on the call as well. So that quote is very applicable to yourself. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
So we do have just a couple of minutes we did want to spend just in terms of engaging and, having a few questions or comments shared with people on the call. This is a great way to start our Voice of Change coffee session. It went beyond our expectations and it makes us look forward to the upcoming ones that we have planned. So thank you so much, Mikateko, for setting the perfect tone for us. Okay, cool. I'm just going to do a bit of a check now. If there's any initial questions, because time, we do have a little bit of time left and we do want to close with one of our founding partners. We want to allocate enough time. I'm seeing hands coming through on the chat. So let's go ahead with it. I see Amina. You can go ahead, please.
Hi, I just want to tell the lady that spoke what I just forgot her name now.
Mikateko.
Mikateko. What an amazing journey you've had. Very inspiring. And as you say, it starts with family. And I love that quote that you made about you can have the highs and you can have the lows. But at the end of the day, it's a beautiful song.
It's a beautiful song.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
And especially over this COVID period that we were on lockdown, family became the most important pillar in our lives. So thank you for inspiring me.
Absolute pleasure. Thank you for allowing me into your space and for
you
listening to me. Thank you.
And thank you for making me feel psychologically safe.
Oh, thank you. That is the best thing ever. Thank you very much.
Love
Thank
that.
you.
Thank you so much, Amina. We have Carmen next.
Thank you very much for this webinar. I just love the she is power, the whole female thing you're going through. One of my questions that I wanted to ask, and when I saw your personality, I could immediately link myself to it because I'm also like that, all up sometimes in someone's face. But what I wanted to ask you is, we talk about leadership. And we constantly use the term leadership, but there is a vast difference between a corporate leader, a manager, a head, and then me, a subordinate operating in a leadership persona. There is a power difference, an authority difference that deteriorates the purpose, if it makes sense what I'm saying.
Yeah.
And at the point where you have done everything that you could in the right platforms, on the right manner, in the right way, what would you suggest would be the next level of saying, you know what, I spoke up of there's not enough growth for women. And I don't want to use the racial or the religious cultural barriers that we have, because we all know this is South Africa. We have a history of it. What would you suggest? How would you go about those challenges?
Yeah, psychological safety is definitely never going to be a destination. It's something that we actually need to work on at every point of engagement. And I say that quite intentionally because it's not about just the one conversation that you're having at your end or just that one conversation that you're having at some point in time. It requires teams or two groups of people or two groups of individuals to actually all sign up to say that this is the culture or this is the climate that we all want to work within, right? Because if you want to work within an area that is psychologically safe, but you're not working with somebody who is wanting to come along with you on that journey, which obviously then talks to the common purpose, then automatically you have this natural tension which is not going to enable you to be at the point of psychologically safe, either as individuals, as a family, or even as a corporate. So it's very important to always have a common purpose around, in some organizations, we have things called team charters. And team charters is literally taking the time out to say, how do we as a team actually want to operate? And you talk to each other about the behaviors that are acceptable and behaviors that are not acceptable. But at the end of the day, whether somebody is the most senior, the most junior, if you've all signed up for that particular team charter or the behaviors that you all agree are the behaviors that will enable all of you to grow, then you have to hold each other accountable. And I'll give you an example where, I definitely in the workplace, I'm non-negotiable on psychological safety. And I actually sat in once in quite a senior meeting where there was no psychological safety. A leader was actually speaking over team members, banging their fists on the table. And I was like, okay, guys, this is not going to enable us to solution anything, right? And to be honest, as a leader, we'll have the detailed conversation outside because you also don't want to, challenge somebody directly within the meeting. But it is our responsibility, if we believe in that common purpose, to call out the behaviors that are not modeling psychological safety. We have to call it out because there's no point if I'm the only person preaching it and saying it. And yet when all of us are in the room observing a time and a place where people are not being made to feel that they belong, not being made to feel heard, not being seen and or respected, if we're not calling it out, then we are just as guilty because then we are rubber stamping that the behavior we've all just been a part of is acceptable. So we have to have the courageous leadership. We all have to dare to lead for psychological safety. It's not going to take one person. It takes a movement. And that's why I call it being an architect of culture within an organization, because it requires a movement of people to actually do it. And I hope that tries to answer that question.
100%. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Mikateko. We had Samantha and Tasneem, and then I think, we're gonna unfortunately sadly need to close. So ladies, you can go ahead, please.
Hi, Mikateko. Wonderful session. I'm so glad
you, Samantha.
I made time for it. I'm a woman. I appreciate your femininity as well as the power in your voice. It really means so much. My question is just maybe more of an observation, because what we have typically is, like you said, there's introverts, there's extroverts, and there's the psychological safety place, right? Which I'm fairly okay with, because as you can see, I have my camera on, I'm comfortable speaking. Then there are people not. In a situation where people just talk because they don't like silence, what does that become then? Because they're just talking for the sake of filling the air.
Yeah. Look, when we are commuting, I think it has to be constructive in whatever shape or form constructive is going to be defined as. But if you look at that Patrick Leone chart, he starts with trust, and there's a couple of other building blocks that get you to the common purpose. So the question is, if you are gathered within a meeting and having a conversation, what are you actually having a conversation about. If the person's just going to talk for the sake of talking, but they're not actually contributing towards that common purpose at the top, then you need to call them out and say, okay, I hear you. However, that's not really the intention of this particular meeting. We're here to actually discuss the following X, Y, and Z. So it's our responsibility to continually make sure that you're moving towards that common purpose. And that's how you can rein in the different individuals that are either derailing or digressing, and keep just bringing them back to that common purpose. And you need to be comfortable enough and confident enough to call that out. And that would be an example of modeling psychological safety and calling out a behavior that is actually not being helpful.
Thank you. Yeah, that's awesome. Once again, thank you for the session. It's great.
Pleasure, Samantha.
Great. Thank you.
Hi. Hi, thank you for the wonderful session and to the organizers. For me, a lot of wonderful nuggets to take, but importantly, I have learned from my own life journey is that when you are feeling powerless, you will never feel psychologically safe, regardless of what the situation is. And I think the key for me is that when you recognize that you're feeling powerless, that I think you need to surround yourself with the correct support structure to help you feel that you are not powerless, regardless of where you are in life, whether it's family, whether it's friends, whether it's with colleagues, whether it's with the CEO of the company or the CFO of the company. So the point is, you can read all the books in the world, go for whatever you want to, but you must feel that you are not a powerless being. And when you feel that you are powerful, regardless of what the situation is, you will stand up for yourself and you will make sure that you are in the space where you are psychologically safe. And importantly, you will recognize somebody who is not psychologically safe, where maybe, like Mikateko said, you would be able to call out and say, listen, this is not the forum for this, in a respectful, dignifying manner. That's just what I feel. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And I 100% agree with you. It's all around personal mastery, knowing who you are, recognizing it when you're not feeling great, and recognizing it when you do feel great. And self-care. Do not underestimate the importance of self-care. Thank you.
Thank you for that. We have Joanne. You can go ahead. We're really running very thin on time. We're going to have to close soon after your question or comment, Joanne.
Thanks. Sorry, I just thought I'd squeeze something. I just wanted to say what I love the session and what you covered. I think what's really key for me is that you have a tribe, right? And one of the things a lot of people raised was, how do you find that space for psychological safety? I think thank you to Accenture for today and to Business Engage and the 30% Club for introducing us to a group of women that is part of that tribe. And this little woman here is also listening in the spaces. And I do think it's incredible. And from that perspective, I actually wanted to say thank you, because when you do feel lonely or you're not sure, your practical examples were incredible. And I think the opportunity to remember those is what sets us in, I suppose, helps us move forward in a good space, because people have been there, done that, not without scars and without lessons learned. But if we share them, I hope, like you, people remember how we make them feel, and that we remember to say thank you to people like you and everyone on this call that also make us feel heard and valued. Thank you so much. What an amazing, the day needs to end now, actually, based on how Friday planned out.
Agreed.
I agree, Joanne. Thank you.
Thanks, Joanne.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, ladies. Thank you very, very much for everyone's engagement on the chats. The conversation will definitely continue. As we're saying, this is the first of many. So we look forward to engaging you in our next month's coffee session. Please be on the lookout. I'll just hand over now to Deshika for us to close. Thank you very much.
Thanks, ladies. And yes, I promise I won't take up too much more time. I heard that message, Joanne. I'm in your space as well. Ready for the long weekend, and I'm sure it's a much deserved long weekend for most people. By way of introduction, my name is Deshika Naidu, and I chair the Nedbank Women's Forum. I would like to start on behalf of my partners, or our partners, Accenture, Business Engage, and all other Voices of Change partner organizations, by thanking each one of you for joining us as we build up towards our August Voices of Change event. Secondly, I'd like to appreciate and then thank Mikateko Tshetshe for being our inaugural speaker of our monthly build-ups, and how apt the topic of psychological safety. I feel that besides the many, many pieces of nuggets and wisdom that you've shared with us, it sets us up to be brave and courageous, to have difficult conversations, and to stand up for gender equity. Through the course of the next few months, we will engage with trailblazers and experts and have the opportunity to hear their stories, share their experiences, and get their takeouts. And we'll continue to learn, empower, and gain tools to shape the future that we want to see. I sincerely hope that you will continue to be part of these sessions and our journey as Voices of Change becomes a movement and continues to gain momentum. From my end to you, just again, a really big thank you for joining us, and I wish you whatever you desire to fill your cup for this long weekend ahead. Take care, be safe, until we connect again. Thank you, everybody.
Bye.
Thank you for filling our cups.